Hey there, this is Michael Becker, and with me today is Alan Mikaelian. And Alan, and like me, is a Tinderbox aficionado and avid community member. And months ago, Alan had given us this just unbelievably great Tinderbox session on integrating Tinderbox with artificial intelligence and tools like ChatGPT, and walk through all of the different local and cloud-based LLM models, not all of them, but quite a few. And sadly, I nuked the recording and we didn't capture it. So fast forward 5 months, where Alan volunteered, or how do you call it when you've been not just
You,
volunteered, but
I
recruit.
wasn't quite voluntold.
Or voluntold, that was it, voluntold. But to like with desperate requests from the community of can we redo the session and re-record it. So Alan has been very gracious in doing that for us. So what we're going to do is I'm going to share my screen, or Alan's going to share his screen and take it over, and then I'll help moderate a conversation with Alan going through his scatter plot methodology and tools and his integration with Tinderbox and AI. So with that as a backdrop, Alan, take it away. Show is
Okay, all
yours.
right, great. Was planning on focusing this session just on how to do the scatter plot, rather than doing the scatter plot with the AI aspects that I had come up with,
Okay.
because all of the stuff within just building a scatter plot seemed to be what the community was mostly asking about. And then there was a side conversation about can we build semantic embeddings into Tinderbox, which you can do, but it takes a lot of external tools in Python. We can do that in a separate session, maybe.
We
But what I was
could,
thinking,
or if we have time near the end, maybe you can just like
yeah,
smattering of introduction to it, and then we
okay.
can take
Um,
the second session.
but everything having to do with just creating a scatter plot in Tinderbox is 100% Tinderbox, except for the data that you'd be importing into this.
Perfect.
Um, I'll go ahead. I have a demo file for this, and I'll upload that or send that to you, and you can upload that with the recording if you want to.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Fantastic.
All right, great. Um, so yeah, this came up because I had a question in the forum about how to get my scatter plot looking just right, and a lot of interest then came out of that about what I was up to here. So I'm going to go ahead and share screens, and I think now you can see my demo file and a floating head there. Is
Yes,
that right? Okay.
absolutely.
So anybody who wants to follow along can just download this file, and all this information will be there. Um, what I wanted to do here is just walk through sort of step by step how you would do this. There's a couple things that have to happen in Tinderbox to make a scatter plot. First thing, you have to assign some kind of meaningful values to the Tinderbox attributes X position and Y position, X pos and Y pos. Um, you have the
And,
option.
and Alan, if I can jump in,
Stop me.
moderator too, before we get started, like maybe you can at a high level, what's the goal? What's the objective? What is as a visual tool, what is a scatter plot? So for those that maybe
Right.
just coming into this new, like maybe you could share with us some insights around that.
Okay. Yeah, a scatter plot is just a way of sort of comparing two values. And in this case, each note in the plot would be a point in the plot, and each note would have its own X and Y value that would determine where it shows up in the plot. It'll become clear when we get to the example what this sort of thing is for, but it's typically to, oops, sorry, typically to sort of show relationships between between two sets of values. Later on, we'll be comparing gross domestic product of different countries to life expectancy of those countries. So you can glance at a plot like that and see that there's definitely a relationship between these two features of each country. Does that seem that
Yep.
makes sense?
I think that's a good step. And so again, what you're doing then is you're going to demonstrate to us, just so we can understand what we're going to see,
Yeah.
is you pulling in the different data sets, those two comparisons that we're going to show us, and you're going to demonstrate how to do that in Tinderbox.
Right, right. Yeah. So the basic process again is just these 3 points. getting meaningful values into those Tinderbox attributes of X position and Y position. Um, Assigning a color to, this is optional, but since you have color as another visual feature in Tinderbox maps, you can assign some other attribute, probably not numeric at this point, maybe a qualitative attribute. In the example we're going to walk through, the points will be colored by continent. And then you have to change the appearance of the notes so that they're not in the map looking any longer like rectangular notes, but more like points in the map view. So those are the three main steps, things that we want to do. I'll start with getting the data. I think most people who would want to do this would have, it would take a very long time to manually enter X and Y positions for each plot. Probably most use cases, they would want to be importing that from somewhere else. So if you have an existing data set outside of Tinderbox, um, then it's in CSV format, then it's very easy, course, to just drag that file into Tinderbox, and it automatically creates a container with full of notes, each note representing one line from that CSV, from that comma separated value file. And Tinderbox will also automatically create attributes based on your column headers in that file. So all good so far on that?
Yep, all good so
Yeah.
far.
Okay, great. You can also do this with JSON data sets. A couple more steps in there, but I wanted to go ahead and mention this since a lot of data available on the web comes in JSON or JSON lines format. And what I found is that it's really easy just to copy paste the whole JSON file into a single Tinderbox note and then using explode. Typically, you'd explode on the closing curly brackets and a comma. In Tinderbox, you have to escape those closing curly brackets if you're using the explode function. But typically, every entry in a JSON file ends with closing curly brackets and a comma, leading you into the next entry in that JSON file. So
Okay,
yeah, okay. All good so far?
good so far.
Okay. So if you're doing this in Tinderbox, you have to be sure to use that delimiter, the escape character, and be sure to have the setting, do not delete this delimiter, because if you do, then Tinderbox will no longer recognize that as valid JSON. It doesn't have the closing characters, so it wouldn't recognize that as JSON any longer.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll just move on from there, and we'll come back to this when I get to the data set. As an overview, defining the X and Y. A couple of asides that I've noted here in the demo file, that if you are using JSON in a note, then you want to bring up this attribute, smart quotes, and make sure it is off. Because if smart quotes sneak into your JSON, it'll become invalid. It won't be recognized as JSON any longer. So I just always try to bring up that attribute, make sure that smart quotes is off. The other thing to keep in mind overall with these scatter plots is that Tinderbox map view has an inverted y-axis. So the negative y's are going up rather
So
than
let me pause you right there too. Again, so for
yeah,
people that are not familiar, right now you're sitting here in outline view,
right.
and some people may not understand what reverse view looks like and map view and all that. So maybe you can briefly explain that and looking at the XPOS.
Okay. Well, this is the data that we're going to plot. Right now, it's not looking anything like a plot. It's just a rectangular set of columns with one note per country. If I called up the attributes X and Y, sorry, and Y. If I called up those attributes, we'd see that Bangladesh right here has this value for X and this value for Y, which determines where it appears in the Tinderbox map, right?
Perfect.
If I move this around, then those values change, right?
Mhm.
So what we're going to
You want to demonstrate the reverse XY? Just
Sure. Yeah, right now our x is negative 82, meaning that this is that the y is negative 82, meaning that somewhere here there's an invisible y-axis, and this is 82 units uh, away from that axis, or moving up that axis. So if I move this down, it'll go from negative 82 to negative 63, right? And if I keep moving it down, this will eventually get to zero. But on most scatter plots, you'll see this would be a positive number until you get below the x-axis, right? But Tinderbox was created for reasons I don't quite understand, but it was created with an inverted y-axis.
Okay.
Um, uh, the developer would have more information about why that was made, but we have to keep it in
And
mind.
we can look that up in ATB Ref too, but I just
Yeah,
wanted to.
yeah. But we do have to keep that in mind while we're plotting. If we want these plots to end up in the above the x-axis rather than below it. Okay, so far so good.
Yep.
Okay, great. So those are just two important asides, two things to keep in mind. Um, I added a note in here about adding new data to existing notes. So if you have a set of notes and you have uh, data in a separate file that you want to sort of merge into those notes, you can do that if each um, uh, set of data in your separate file has an ID that corresponds to some ID in your Tinderbox note. So if this, for example, was the actual Tinderbox note ID, attribute ID, then and if that you could set it up so that appears in your external JSON file, then it's pretty easy to do an import. You just set up a stamp along these lines
Okay.
where you say X position would equal the text of
And
this.
again, your picture's in front of the
Oh,
stamps. Maybe you
sorry.
scroll up a little bit so people can see it.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Or let's see if I can move myself around. That's better. Yeah.
No.
Nope. Still there?
Yeah, you're still in the bottom right. There you go. Now you're moved.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. All right. Thank you. Um, So what we'd be doing here is saying that the X position would be equal to, and then you have to call up as your object the text of the node containing the JSON that you've copied and pasted into Tinderbox, dot using now the JSON command in Tinderbox, followed by some ID, followed by this ID, which would be guided directly to the node that you want to merge it into, um, followed by whatever key you wanted to merge into. And then this value would end up in your node if you were doing it this way, if you were merging JSON data into an existing Tinderbox node. And that's, I think this became useful for me because I was taking data from Tinderbox, exporting it into another process that would generate new values, right? And then it would spit out JSON. And each JSON entry had my actual Tinderbox ID. So this made it really easy just to pull the results of that process back into Tinderbox, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So that's sort of a special case. If you wanted to create new notes from a JSON file, I go into that here. And that's again using explode reminders to not remove the delimiter. And here this is what you would get after explode. Each note that results from the explosion would have something like this in it, right? Which would be a set of key value pairs. And then to get the values from these key value pairs into one of the Tinderbox attributes, you would use a stamp like this. For example, here the name um, of the Tinderbox note, you could change to the text, so get the text of meaning the note that that contains this little JSON snippet, and the attribute we're looking for is title. So what would appear if you applied this stamp to this note, the title would change to this text, title A. Does that make sense so far?
It does.
Okay. Okay, great. So this is, I mean, I'm using this a lot, and I'm really happy with it. It's really handy, because so much of the data that's out there is in JSON, and so many of the processes that I end up taking my notes through external to Tinderbox come back as JSON. So again, this is useful, and I think we just go, try, anybody who wants to do this, just try going through this or trying using these stamps. But then let's get to the comments.
And really quick though, just so people that may not be familiar with that,
Yeah.
you're seeing the stamps written in your text, but the stamps are actually built into Tinderbox, correct? So if you hit Command Option 1,
Yeah. Are you seeing that menu drop down?
yeah.
Yeah.
So you've actually implemented those stamps into Tinderbox code. So
Yeah, exactly.
if they hit the inspector or go to the document inspector and hit Option, or by hitting Command 1, they can actually see the stamps. So what you've been showing us is just your kind of README file to help people understand the instructions.
Yeah, exactly. Are you seeing the document inspector right now?
Yes.
Oh, you are. Okay, good, good. Well, for right now, let me close it and come back. We'll come back to that. So anyway, all that stuff about JSON aside, one of the easiest ways to get a lot of data into Tinderbox is just to drag in a comma separated value. And you can see how easy the stamps are for something like that. If you want to define your Y position, then it's already been set up for you. The Y position that you are looking for was probably in one of the columns of the CSV that you dragged in. So now you just overriding the current Y position that node has in the map with a new value. For Y, you're always multiplying by -1 to take into account the inverted axis. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Great. So real quickly on the next thing, once you have X and Y positions assigned to all of your notes and you want to start mapping it, one of the first things to do is to start creating the view. If you just looked at it without doing this, you'd get all your notes would be overlapping and jumbled together. What the goal here now is to reduce those notes to a very small point. They're not going to have any text visible in them, and then to eventually assign them a color according to some other attribute. So again, and like you said, I have a stamp here, which I'll run through. But basically, we're turning the shape from a rectangle into an oval. We're setting the height and width to something very, very small, and setting map name size to 1. The default is 100, and what we're doing is just basically getting rid of the title,
Yeah.
for that note. Now coloring by some attribute, it's so in this case, and this is just the way that I went through this I like using JSON for situations like this. You could use in a stamp a series of if else statements. What you're basically doing is saying, if in this case, if we have a note regarding a country that is in Asia, color that note red. So in a stamp, you could just do if this attribute continent equals Asia, then color equals red. And then keep going down with your next if then, if else, all the way to the bottom. But I usually find it a bit easier just to type out what I want in JSON, because sometimes I might want to color by continent and other times I might want to color by size. And in this case, I have a note that will accommodate both. So then I just need a stamp that says, okay, use this part of the JSON file to color by continent, and I'll get color by continent. And if I change my mind, then I can just use a different stamp that says, no, instead use size, and then color
Okay.
by size. Yeah?
Yep.
Okay. All right, good. Um, okay, and then the last thing we will do is we'll go through axes and tick marks. And here is sort of a narrative about that, but I think this part especially is going to be much easier to see if I just if I go through the demo.
Perfect.
Okay. And then I'll come back to some ideas about exploring, which is just covers why would we ever want to do this? Okay, so let's just jump in. Here is uh, all of the countries that I pulled from Gapminder, which is an educational nonprofit that tracks statistics, different countries. And what I pulled from what I was mostly interested in, just because it makes a really clear scatter plot and there is a clear relationship. I have here for each country pulled in from Gapminder the GDP per capita in US dollars, um, and the life expectancy of each country. So, Kenya, GDP per capita, $5, life expectancy is 67 years. Um, what I want to do now is see these two numbers in relationship to each other. So I'm going to select all. I'm going to open up my stamps so that we can see them. And first thing I'm going to want to do is plot these countries, right? So this stamp, which I'm going to just now apply to all these.
So real quick though, I know
Yeah,
you talked a lot about CSV files and JSON and getting these notes in there. Do you have an
yeah.
example of a CSV file that you downloaded?
I was looking for that before we started talking, and I couldn't find it. But it was simply just a text file .csv, and all I did was drag it into Tinderbox to get
And
all
then
these.
Tinderbox will automatically explode that and populate the appropriate attributes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If we go back to our outline.
Yeah, maybe you can, maybe when you send me if you are able to find it, maybe you could send me the Tinderbox file and this
Okay.
GDP PCAP CSV file just so people can play with it.
Okay. All right. Cool. Um, all right. So I'm going to go ahead to select all of these, and then this stamp will assign the Y position to the number for life expectancy multiplied by -1. The X position will be the GDP per capita, and then we'll get the colors in there. This is referring to a note over here called country colors. And you see the country colors is like that JSON file I was talking about that just tells you which color belongs to which continent. So this line in the stamp will assign a color depending on what continent. Then
Perfect.
I'm going to change the height and the width to something very small and change the shape to an oval. So let's see if it works.
Okay.
I think there we go. Okay, it just took a second. Okay, I'm going to wait for it to stop spinning its wheels. And now there we have a plot. I'm going to change just the scale on this. Yep, and so we have life expectancy coming out here and GDP going up, and we get this curve right here, showing us that yes, life expectancy goes up with GDP, but it has this limit, and then here, sort of the curve of the shape of the whole thing kind of flattens out. So that tells us some things, but now I'm going to go to, well, let's see, yeah, I plot appearance just repeats some of the code that's in plot countries here. So you could do it one step at a time if you wanted to. But this is just a repeat of that. Okay, so we also want to get in here some axes. And so I decided to make axes with adornments. So I'm just gonna make an adornment here and just call it X. And I'll apply this stamp, X axis to it. And see this, what's gonna happen here is gonna make it very long and very thin with an X position of 0 and a Y position of -50, right? And it's gonna color it black.
Okay.
So if I apply, it just becomes this nice line right there, right?
Yeah.
Y-axis, I'm going to make another adornment and call this Y. I can call it this anything, but we'll just so. And then here again, it's going, now this position comes about through a lot of trial and error. I think sometimes it's going to depend on where your data goes, how high your data goes. So I found for this particular plot, 120 was the position of -120 was going to be about right, and the height of about 70 was going to be about right. But let's see there. So it's just another adornment that intersects with this one right here. And now we can start to see that it's contained by this, sort of contained by this shape.
Yeah.
Next, I'm going to create another. Now we're going to get some tick marks for some scale. And so this tick mark. Now here, see, I decided to give the tick mark a position based on the name of the tick mark. So this one, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do a Y first. I'm going to say 100. So that's our actual Y position. And that is from this line right here. Y position equals that -1 again, because of the inverted axis, times the name to number, right? So that name 100 is going to be converted into a number, and then that's going to be assigned to the Y position. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And again, we're going to make it very long or very thin. So I'm going to apply that now, and there it shows up right there. So that's 100. Now you could do another adornment and just label that as 100, but at least now we have a tick mark. So I'll do it again with 75, and that should show up below that one. There it is right there. And we'll just do one more with 50. Okay, that actually happened. Okay, I forgot. I set my my Y starting at 50. So that's going to show up. It's going to look like it's at sort of the 0 position.
But does that mean that the 100's actually not at 100, but actually at something else?
100's actually at 100, but I've sort of just moved the axes up because we don't really start getting into any values at all until here, where life expectancy is 50. So if I had started all the way down at actual 0, then you would have had the x-axis way below all of the actual data that you're looking at.
Got it.
So sorry about that. I forgot that was true of my plot. Okay, so let's do X now. I'll start here with 75, see where that takes us. X all the way out here. So there's some other ones out here, so I should probably do 100. Create adornment, 100, and apply. Oh, could you probably even go to 125? But I think you get the idea.
Yeah.
I'll fill these in with 50 and 25. And I'm clicking all the way out of the note and then reselecting it because it doesn't seem to work if the cursor is in the name position. Okay, so that's a plot. So I wanted to go back to sort of why I guess sure if you have any questions or comments already, then maybe this would be a good place to. No?
I like how would you actually put numbers along the ticks, if that makes sense? Or
Yeah, I think I would probably do that with adornments. I'm sorry, my camera is falling down. How am I doing now?
you've disappeared. You're dark.
Disappeared. Darn.
Now you're back.
Yeah, but I won't be for long. This isn't stable. All right, I'm gonna be not here for a minute. Okay. Yeah, if I
Now,
want to put numbers
now
here.
your face is being covered by like a piece of paper or something. It's all there. You go.
Okay. Um, am I still sharing my screen with you?
You're still sharing your screen, yeah.
Okay. With a okay.
But
Uh,
your Zoom overlay of yourself on top of your screen is missing now. But that's okay.
okay. All right. So you have a scatter plot, but no face. That's
Yeah.
all right. That'll do for now. If I wanted to put actual labels in there, I think I would probably do something like this. Just it's another adornment. Um, and you just can set that up.
Manually move it around.
Yeah,
Now,
man.
and
Um,
what do you see the benefits of doing this in Tinderbox versus say a spreadsheet or some other tool? I mean, what
right.
value are you getting out of this by because I could see someone looking at this and like, well, this is a lot of effort when I could just use Excel.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think the benefit would come is if you have other thoughts about these data points. If you were collecting information on different nations, and just one of those things was life expectancy GDP, and you plotted this out, you could then start exploring by just selecting different countries. Okay, saying, well, what's this one out here? This is Singapore. Well, that's interesting. And then you take notes. Um, uh, this is an outlier, and speculate on why. Yeah,
Right. And that's like the affordance that a tool like Excel or others don't really give you because
right.
you don't have that kind of multi-dimensional landscape in those two-dimensional tools like you do in Tinderbox.
Hmm. And you could also hear, I think, and I haven't played around with this enough, but you can create an adornment and start circling certain nodes, capturing certain nodes within that adornment, right? Label that, maybe put an add-on in there, and then everything that you've captured in here could be possibly take on a new attribute.
Yeah,
Um,
and then also in theory, you could, and if you don't mind while we're playing with this, select just one node.
sure. In this
It doesn't
adornment,
matter anymore. You now hit Option Shift Enter, and
okay,
that actually, and then and give it a name, right? And that actually is now creating a child note about that particular. Did you hit Shift Enter or Option Shift Enter?
no, I think I miskeyed it, but okay, I see what you're saying. I didn't.
Right.
Okay.
And so Option Shift Enter.
Okay. Did that do it?
Yeah, it might have. If you can, maybe if you hit the Command plus and zoom in.
Okay.
Right. And maybe and just for playing around with it, why don't you resize that dot real quick?
Okay.
Right. Now hit Option Shift Enter and see what's happening. Now, my expectation would be Option Shift Enter. Stop it. No. Okay, now drag that. Just go ahead and type anything
Yeah.
real quick.
Right. Yeah, I see what you're saying, though. We can start creating.
Drag that in. See, now you're creating a container, right? So
Yeah.
you could, and if you had an on add on that container, that's how you then create sub notes about UAE, for example. And then later you could pull those up using an agent or something else to actually write your report.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, well, I had some other small thoughts about exploring this and why we would do this in Tinderbox. Just a few notes in here. Um, Finding outliers is interesting. Finding clusters could be interesting. Um, and again, once you've lassoed a bunch of them, you could apply a stamp to them all, and then create an agent that would retrieve the ones that you just applied that stamp to.
Right.
So the creating groups and subgroups based on where they end up in the
And when
pod.
you say applying a stamp in that context, you're populating another attribute, maybe
Right.
yeah, another user generated attribute that you then use to search against.
Yeah, yeah, you could just generate an attribute called group, and then say this, this group is a group of outliers or a group of very rich countries or very poor countries. Um, you can use links within this scatter plot. You can go ahead and take, just like you would in any other Tinderbox map. It becomes a bit more difficult when you're not zoomed all the way in. I think this is going to end up. Let's
Yeah,
see.
it ends up
Oh yeah, no, that time it worked. Yeah, but see, just like any other Tinderbox map, now you can just you can create links if you wanted to between these different points in the plot. And I already mentioned just be the ability to do different adornments. And you can quickly filter too, just using agents or to and then mapping what's inside the agent rather than mapping every piece of data that you have. So those are some of the thoughts I had about how to use this.
nice.
Yeah. What I was using it for, and this gets into, I guess, what we'll have to talk to at some point in the future, was I was plotting the semantic embeddings of my notes. And what had happened, you mentioned the AI aspect of this at the beginning. So I was exporting my notes to a vector database, which would assign them embeddings, which are like points in hyperdimensional space developed by a large language model, right? And then it allows for you to uh, search through nodes by syntactic similarity rather than just by keyword search.
Hmm.
So I'm going kind of fast because and not sharing nearly enough detail about this, um, but each node then in my vector database, would have between, I mean, 300 to 900 different coordinates. Uh,
Right.
and and then another Python script, once that was established, could reduce those coordinates down to two. You lose a lot of data that way, but you start to get something that you can actually look at and wrap your head around. So I would then took those two-dimensional coordinates for all my notes and imported them back into Tinderbox and merged the new X position and Y position just using the note ID, which had been exported along with the note in my original export. So then I had a cloud of which notes were semantically similar to other notes, which is pretty cool and kind of useful. Um,
Yeah, and maybe that's another session we could schedule and go through that because I think people would really be interested in understanding in more depth that those Python scripts and how you pull together that those LLM models.
yeah, yeah. And I think it's good to have that as a separate conversation, and people who are interested in doing scatter plots
Yeah,
can
just
focus
focus on this.
just on this, just the nuts and bolts of doing this part of it.
Yeah.
Okay, so any other thoughts or
No,
questions?
I think it's absolutely fantastic, and it's a really great demo to demonstrate how you can be leveraging Tinderbox. Now, I guess one other question I have is, have you thought about uh, implementing the scatterplot methodology with the new or relatively new posters feature? So
Okay,
rather
yeah.
so rather than you
Go ahead
map,
and tell me what you're thinking, because I haven't really wrapped my head around posters completely. I know it has to do with using your notes along with external websites like Plotly and things like that.
yeah. So let's look at Plotly real quick. Plotly, or maybe Chat.js. I'm doing a quick search here. Yeah, so for example, what I'm gonna, and I'll go ahead and share my screen here real quick, just so we can see it. So what that would do is, so in Tinderbox, you've got a functionality called posters. And what that functionality allows you to do is, let me share my screen real quick, is you can download like chart.js. You could
Yeah.
download the chart.js JavaScript for running a scatter plot.
Okay.
And then what you could do is you could take all of those notes that you just pulled in from the CSV file
Mhm.
and feed those individual data points into the JavaScript file that is the chart.js.
Mhm.
So in other words, you could build a fancy scatter plot just like you were doing in Tinderbox, but rather doing it more Excel-like and more using, and then what Tinderbox would do is it would then generate in the map view basically a picture, this image in the map view of that scatter plotted data. Now, where you would think, I think you would lose your and so essentially you download the JavaScript, you integrate that with the poster functionality, and you could be
Right.
generating that image.
Right.
Where I think you'd lose the benefits, many of the benefits of Tinderbox, as you and I just discussed, though, is you're now essentially just rendering an image of the scatter plot. You
Right.
can't really then add notes or do the linking or any of the thinking with the individual data points like you could as you demonstrated.
Right. Although you could, if I think, you're getting little mouse overs when you hover over any of these dots, right? And you should be able to.
Well,
Uh,
you could, but the problem is no, I'm getting mouse overs from the JS JavaScript image of that scatter plot. That's not inherently a Tinderbox note-taking function because
right.
I'm not in Tinderbox right now. I'm in a browser demonstrating
Yeah.
JS chart.js a scatter plot. So in Tinderbox, like I couldn't like Option Shift Enter and then create a note associated with that particular data point.
Right. But what I was thinking is if you have any control over what appears in the mouse over, then you could export, sorry, for example, the title of that note. And then as you hover over, the title of the note would appear. So you would be looking at, well, what is this dot that I'm looking at?
Yeah, in theory, yeah, you could
Yeah.
do all the naming and all of that and get all of that. So you could get
Yeah.
a really great, Excel like, JavaScript powered rendering of the scatter plot as an image.
Right.
My point being is you lose all of the note-taking affordances that you get with that. You lose the linking, like
Yeah.
linking, dragging this link, creating that linking association there. So, and
Yeah.
honestly, as I talk through it, I think this is where you could start having the best of both worlds, in
Hmm.
that you could, using the same data set in Tinderbox, you could download chart like a Plotly or a chart like JS to get the really what we'll call the pretty exportable image version of a scatter plot for say a paper you're writing,
Right.
and then still do what you just demonstrated in building the scatter plot in your Tinderbox file for then creating the additional notes and creating the associations and linkings and powering all of your thinking. So
Okay.
that way you kind of get both. You get the really pretty image that you would expect from like an Excel export, plus
Yeah.
all the multi-dimensional thinking you get in Tinderbox.
Okay. Okay. And that's so posters would come in and that you would be able to just render that chart inside Tinderbox or
Correct. So let
um,
me really quickly pull up a Tinderbox poster
sure.
just so we can demonstrate it really quick. And again, I hadn't intended to do this demo, so a little backward, but let's go like here. And we'll I'm just trying to find the demo file up on here we go. Right, so for example, here is the posters demo that Mark Bernstein had provided us way, way, way back. Where'd it go? Sorry. Got to reopen it. My Tinderbox is now opening up a bunch of different files. Here we go. So here's it. All right. Let me hit. Got too much opened. All right. Let's see if this works now. There we go. Okay. So here are examples of posters. So for instance, if you're looking in map view, you can feed into Tinderbox just like you were showing here in your README files, you could be feeding into Tinderbox these values and generating any different number of types of. So this is a JavaScript that's pulling the values from the note
Okay.
and then rendering that output,
Okay.
right? So these are different examples of maps
All
that
right.
you could be doing, leveraging Tinderbox.
Okay. The
I,
difference being that then in these charts right here, you're not able to click on, for example, start and see
correct.
information about what that node is. Okay.
Correct. So like here, so here's different posters, right? So I'm running a JavaScript that runs math. I'm running a JavaScript that runs a mermaid type file, a
Right.
JavaScript that creates historicals, a JavaScript that's creating photos. Here's a bar chart. Here's your scatter plot kind of
Right.
weight versus age. Here's a graph. So you can use all of these. You use the JS to render the really pretty image,
Hmm.
right? And so you can get all of these really great beyond the Tinderbox internal views. You're getting all of these other kinds of really powerful views of your data in Tinderbox. But my point being is you can have the best of both worlds. If you pull in leveraging posters, you can get the pretty, the non-interactive JS image of that. So I can now screenshot that image and pull it into the paper I'm writing.
Okay. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And then similarly, all of the notes that I'm taking in the way you're going about doing it, I can then
Right.
pull those notes and wrap it in around that image and getting all of my thinking too out of that process.
Hmm. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, so that's just something I might add to that. Okay, well, this has been thank you so much for taking the time
Yeah.
and,
Sure.
and helping us see that. And if you don't mind, you've got my calendar link. Maybe in the next week or two, or whenever you get time, let's schedule another session to go through your AI modeling, which I think that
Okay.
is equally interesting.
Okay, yeah, good. If we can figure out time to talk, um, I'd like to just show you what I've got, and then maybe you could help me
Yeah, yeah,
decide
yeah, no
what
worries.
best for the, this audience pretty well.
Yeah.
What should I be sharing with them, and what,
Perfect.
is.
So okay, you know how to schedule a meeting with me. So let's schedule two. The pre-recording and then the recording session too.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Alan, thank you very much. Really
All right,
appreciate it.
thank you. Yeah,
All right.
take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.